Hi, I'm Richard Wayne Horton. I live in Springfield, Massachusetts, and I write flash fiction. Today I'll introduce you to my new chapbook, Ballet for Murderers, for which I'm looking for a publisher. Please order my other book too, Artists in the Underworld, a dark speculative feast for the imagination, with 8 stellar reviews on Amazon. Ballet for Murderers, the escape, travels, and final downfall of a murderer. Here, a murder begins as a director at a detention center. The Americans come. What, this isn't America already? No, it's old days in Central Europe. He's a Nazi. Crazy. He escapes to New York and becomes a hero to hoodlums. But then he settles down to a Mickey Mouse career as a company exec. Funny how evil men can end up in leadership. Did I see you jump with surprise just then? Anyway, at long last, the Nazi hunters find him. But what do you know? He escapes again, like always, and starts a life of flight. From a grimy bus seat, he sees magnificent scenery pass his window, double exposed on a memory screen that torments him with coulda, shoulda. It has to end, though. If you're like me, you know how endings work. Is this a comic book? Murderers are often charming, aren't they sweet? But even if they aren't, even if they're fairly dreadful, you may be charmed by them when you pick up a comic book in which their lives are celebrated in brightly colored cells, red, black, yellow, thick black lines around the chin, the mouth, the eyes. But as you fall in love with the murderer, you should be aware that you can expect a wallop of terror when you go to sleep that night, the night of the day, when you found the comic book, perhaps on a forest path, or maybe in your front yard after it was thrown from the window of a speeding car. Yes, when you close your eyes that night, other eyes will open. They are directly above you. They have found you. Newspapers stalk the murderer. The newspaper spreads to the horizon an outstretched arm of paper, black letters that crackle in the wind. Murderer still at large. A reader turns the page only to have it wrap around his arm and cling like a sentimental joke. Later he's seen walking through the rain wrapped in a cocoon of wet newspaper pulp. The rustling at the murderer's door grows louder. The newspapers have come. Drawing his revolver, he holds them off, long enough to blockade the door with realist furniture. Boards across a window, a bent nail. Outside, another truck stops, and newspapers blow from its bed toward his door. Yikes, he's out the back window. Kind of funny when you think about it. The idea that getting caught, serving jail time, going to the electric chair, means shit. The murderer's old lover. I think of you, a glass of wine, 2 years old. I'm drunk. It happens in damp rooms. A memory rolls down her face, wasting away. A hand on her forehead trails fingers. Can a tinkle of ice heard over the phone trigger the avalanche? Goodbye. What was that terrible word you said? The murderer tries to hide out. Strange and far was his cabin. It faced the wrong direction and stood beside the wrong lake. The fish there were made of air, which reminds me, don't look up. The murderer looks at a cloud. In the motionless hot air beside a road smudged with tar, trees sing subconsciously. There's a big house nearby, a drink of water from a garden hose. Beyond that, a yellow hayfield. Beneath the field, a naked beating noise. beat Barry, beat Barry, beat Barry. Up in the sky, the clouds are chariots of pink ice cream. A child king rides them all day, calling across vast distances. I see you. The murderer gripes about his childhood. Thin, twisty, poor, that's what we were. The nose would get twisted around. The clothes, wrinkles wouldn't come out of them. They were twisted like everything else. Someone, somewhere, had grabbed the sky and was pulling it out of shape. The buildings were wrinkled. The world was sideways. In bed with bombs. Lights out and the aftermath of beans. The brothers lay in bed hitting each other. Outside, war was raging. The bomber, a crying saint, shed tears that shattered a church window, completing it. Death of the murderer. The bus had been making wrong turns and the driver wouldn't listen when the murderer objected. The murderer yelled, "I could teach you a lesson." The driver shook his head and said, "You can't threaten me." "It's not a threat, it's a promise." "My mistake." The driver exchanged a smile with one of the passengers. Another wrong turn. The murderer yelled, "I could kill you in a heartbeat. I've done it before." "Oh, please, be my guest." The murderer fell silent. His silences had once been feared. A predatory smile positioned itself on his face, his old smile, back from storage. The bus swerved madly. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Dismay replaced the hunter's smile. "Stop, I tell you. I've grown tired of my trip." "As you wish. If I were you, but I'm not. Very well then, not my idea of the perfect destination. But I'm not a murderer, am I?" The bus pulled to the curb beneath a giant elm tree. The door clattered open. "Watch your step, sir." On a sidewalk at midnight, the murderer watched the bus pull away. He waved a disgusted hand at it, then turned. Before him rose an iron gate with letters worked into its grillwork. Wanderer's Return. In the morning, hanging out at the cemetery, the murderer meets the terrible child who's unaware that he's a demon. He thinks he's just a bored kid showing off his special abilities. And boy, does he have them. Though he doesn't like the murderer all that much, he eventually shows him a path to lower places, where he likes to go have fun. In the lower places. Now, reader, you will hear with surprise an account of the murderer's progress in the lower places, where his guide, the terrible child, impresses him with his ability to pass through stone or metal walls by merely leaning against them until they submit. Also through fires did the two souls venture, unconsumed. They come at length to a chamber where ardents, or eyes, or little flames, innumerable, circle in a gallery. Or perhaps their circling itself is the gallery. Or perhaps there is no gallery. The terrible child remarks, "I have joined their rout at times, and made to eat them, but they had no taste or meaning." At that, the murderer says, "I will go to them." The terrible child says, "Take my hand then." They rise and join the rout. The terrible child indifferent, but the murderer possessed, for the ardents are portals. They are souls. They are love. They are knowledge. They are eyes. They have found him. He has found his downfall. Eternal love for what he has killed. Fire never ending.